Masks we wear. The brushstrokes flowed effortlessly across the canvas as Prisha Mehta added the final touches to her submission for the university art exhibition. The small studio apartment she shared with her roommate Zoya was cluttered with art. Supplies, textbooks, and the remnants of last night's budget dinner. A stack of unpaid bills sat on the counter beside a calendar marked with her work shifts at the campus cafe and the local bookstore. "That's stunning," Zoya said, peering over Prisha's shoulder at the vibrant abstract piece. "Professor Sharma will love it." Prisha smiled wearily. "Let's hope so. This exhibition could mean everything for my scholarship renewal." At 22, Prisha was in her final year at Delhi Arts University. Her education funded by a combination of merit scholarships and part-time jobs. Her father, a postal worker in their small hometown of Dehradun, had sacrificed everything to support her dreams, and her mother supplemented the family income by selling handmade textiles. Failure wasn't an option. "You're still coming tonight, right?" Zoya asked, applying lipstick before her evening shift at the upscale restaurant where she worked as a hostess. "The gallery opening has free wine and enough fancy people to make excellent networking opportunities." Prisha hesitated. "I don't know if I belong there, Zoe." "Nonsense. Your work is being featured. Plus, you need to get out more." Zoya tossed her a dress from her own collection, a simple black number that somehow looked expensive. "Wear this. You can return it tomorrow." That evening, Prisha felt like an imposter as she wandered through the gleaming exhibition hall. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, and well-dressed patrons sipped champagne while discussing the merits of various artistic techniques. Her painting hung in a corner, attracting occasional glances but no lengthy discussions. "The interplay of shadow and light is quite remarkable," a deep voice said behind her. Prisha turned to find a tall man studying her painting with genuine interest. His tailored suit suggested money, but his eyes held something more compelling. Authentic curiosity. "You think so?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Absolutely. The technique reminds me of Raza's work, but with a contemporary twist." He extended his hand. "Vikram Singhania." The name triggered recognition. The Singhania family owned one of India's largest textile empires. Their newest sustainable fashion line had been featured in all the major magazines. "Prisha Mehta," she replied, taking his hand. "It's my piece." His eyes widened with appreciation. "Truly impressive. Are you representing a particular gallery?" The question was innocent enough, but something in his demeanor, the easy confidence of someone who had never worried about money, triggered an unexpected response in Prisha. "Not yet," she heard herself saying. "My family's foundation supports emerging artists, so I've had the luxury of developing my style without commercial pressure." The lie emerged so smoothly that it surprised her. Vikram nodded appreciatively, and Prisha felt a twinge of guilt even as she continued. "My parents believe art should be pursued for its own sake," she elaborated, drawing from articles she'd read about wealthy patrons. Their conversation flowed effortlessly after that. Vikram spoke about his travels, his business ventures, and his passion for supporting the arts. Prisha matched his stories with fabrications of her own, international schools she'd never attended, family vacations to places she'd only seen in magazines. By the end of the evening, they had exchanged phone numbers, and Vikram had invited her to a private exhibition the following weekend. As she watched him walk away, Prisha felt a mixture of exhilaration and dread. She had crafted a persona that might impress Vikram Singhania, but it was a house of cards that could collapse with the slightest breeze. "What was that about?" Zoya asked, appearing at her side. "That was Vikram Singhania you were talking to." Prisha stared at Vikram's retreating figure, still feeling the warmth of his handshake. "I think I just made a terrible mistake." Paper castles, Prisha's phone screen illuminated with another message from Vikram, casting a soft glow across her cramped bedroom. 3 weeks had passed since the gallery opening, and what had begun as a spontaneous fabrication had evolved into an elaborate web of lies that required constant maintenance. "Another dinner invitation?" Zoya asked from her desk, where she was completing an assignment. Her tone carried a hint of disapproval that had been growing with each passing day. "The new fusion restaurant on Morowli Road," Prisha confirmed, trying to sound casual despite her churning stomach. "Apparently, it's impossible to get reservations, but his family knows the owner." Zoya abandoned any pretense of studying and swiveled her chair to face Prisha directly. "This has gone far enough, Pry. You're creating a fictional character he's falling for, not yourself." "It's not that simple," Prisha protested, though the truth in her friend's words stung. "You don't understand what it's like talking to someone like him. The assumption that everyone has traveled to Europe, that everyone's parents have investment portfolios. So educate him. People from different backgrounds fall in love every day without inventing fake lives." Prisha's shoulders slumped as she scrolled through the conversation history with Vikram. Their exchanges were filled with intellectual discussions about art, literature, and philosophy, genuine connections that made her heart race. But interspersed were her carefully constructed lies. Mentions of her family estate in Mussoorie, references to board meetings her fictional parents attended, anecdotes about childhood summers spent in foreign countries. "I think I might be falling in love with him, Zoe," she admitted quietly, the realization both thrilling and terrifying. "Then you need to tell him the truth before this goes any further," Zoya advised, her expression softening. "The longer you wait, the worse it will be." But Prisha couldn't bring herself to shatter the illusion. Instead, she borrowed more clothes from Zoya, researched luxury brands to drop into casual conversation, and studied financial magazines to understand the world she was pretending to inhabit. She scheduled dates around her work shifts, claiming business meetings or family obligations when she was actually serving coffee or restocking bookshelves. Vikram, for his part, seemed completely enchanted. He listened intently when she spoke, respected her opinions, and never flaunted his wealth in an ostentatious manner. His genuine interest in her artistic vision made the deception even more painful. One evening, after a particularly lovely dinner where Vikram had insisted on paying despite her token protests, a relief as the bill exceeded her weekly food budget, they strolled through a moonlit park. The night air carried the scent of jasmine, and distant music from a cultural festival created a romantic backdrop. "You're different from anyone I've ever met," Vikram said, taking her hand. His touch sent electricity through her veins. "Most people I know from similar backgrounds are obsessed with appearances, with maintaining their social position. But you see beyond all that." The irony of his statement wasn't lost on Prisha, who had spent the previous night researching designer handbags so she could casually reference the collection her mother had supposedly gifted her. "Maybe I just have different priorities," she managed to reply. "Exactly," he said enthusiastically. "You understand that wealth is meant to enable passion and creativity, not just accumulation. That's what attracted me to you that first night. Your authenticity." Each word was a dagger to her heart. Authentic was the one thing she hadn't been with him. Later that week, while preparing for another date, Prisha's phone rang with her father's weekly call. The sound of his voice, tired from long hours at the postal office but warm with pride for his daughter, intensified her shame. "How are your studies, Beta?" he asked. "Your mother and I were thinking of visiting next month if we can arrange." "The train tickets!" Panic seized Prisha. Her parents couldn't visit, not when she was pretending to live a life so different from the reality they had sacrificed to provide. "It's not a good time, Papa," she said quickly. "Final projects and exhibitions are coming up." The disappointment in his silence was palpable, adding another layer to her growing mountain of guilt. After ending the call, Prisha found Zoya watching her with concern. This isn't just about a boy anymore, Zoya observed sadly. You're starting to be ashamed of your real life, your real family. Before Prisha could defend herself, her phone chimed with a new message from Vikram that would raise the stakes even higher. My parents are hosting their annual charity gala next Saturday at our estate in Chhatarpur. I've told them all about you and your family's foundation. They're excited to meet you and discuss potential collaborations. Please say you'll come. Prisha stared at the message in horror. Meeting his parents? Discussions about her non-existent family foundation? This was no longer a game of pretend during dinner dates. The fantasy world she had created was about to collide catastrophically with reality. What am I going to do? She whispered, showing Zoya the message. Her friend read it and sighed deeply. You have exactly 1 week to either tell him the truth or prepare for the most elaborate performance of your life. Choose wisely, Pri. As Prisha gazed out the window at the bustling Delhi street below, she knew her paper castle was about to face a storm it couldn't possibly withstand. Invitation to nowhere. The Singhania estate sprawled across several acres of meticulously landscaped grounds on the outskirts of Delhi. As the taxi approached the wrought iron gates, Prisha's heart hammered against her ribs with such force she feared it might bruise. She had spent the past week in a state of escalating panic, alternating between planning her confession and rehearsing more elaborate lies. In the end, cowardice had won. She had accepted the invitation, borrowed a designer dress from Zoya's wealthy cousin, and spent her last savings on professional hair and makeup. The result was undeniably stunning. Prisha barely recognized her reflection, but the transformation was only skin-deep. Beneath the facade, she remained the daughter of a Delhi postal worker, a scholarship student working part-time jobs to afford art supplies. You can still turn back, she whispered to herself, as the taxi driver waited for the security guard to verify her name on the guest list. But then the gates swung open, revealing a driveway lined with luxury cars and twinkling lights strung through ancient banyan trees. The estate house itself was a masterful blend of colonial architecture and contemporary design, all soaring ceilings, marble floors, and floor-to-ceiling windows that revealed glimpses of the glamorous gathering inside. A uniformed attendant opened her taxi door, and Prisha stepped out on trembling legs. "Welcome to Singhania House, miss," the attendant said with a practiced smile. "Mr. Vikram is waiting for you in the East Garden." Following the attendant's directions, Prisha navigated through corridors adorned with museum-quality art, including pieces by masters she had only studied in textbooks. Each step deeper into this world of privilege increased her feeling of displacement, as if she were an imposter in a play where everyone else had memorized the script. She found Vikram standing beside a fountain, handsome in a tailored tuxedo, his face lighting up at the sight of her. The genuine pleasure in his expression sent a fresh wave of guilt crashing over her. "You look absolutely breathtaking," he said, taking both her hands in his. "I was beginning to worry you wouldn't come." "I wouldn't miss it," she lied, accepting the champagne flute he offered from a passing server's tray. "Your home is incredible." "This old place?" He laughed. "It's a bit ostentatious for my taste, but it's been in the family for generations. Nothing like your family's heritage property in Mussoorie, I imagine. You described it so beautifully, with the colonial architecture and views of the Himalayas." Prisha nearly choked on her champagne. She had indeed fabricated stories about a mountain estate, drawing from descriptions in novels and travel magazines. "Different styles entirely," she managed, desperately changing the subject. "The artwork in your entrance hall, is that an original M.F. Hussein?" "Good eye. Father acquired it at auction last year. But enough about art and architecture. My parents are eager to meet you. They've been particularly interested since I mentioned your family foundation's focus on arts education for underprivileged children." The irony was almost too much to bear. Prisha had invented the foundation based on her own frustrated desires, programs she wished had existed when she was a talented but poor child with no connections to the art world. As Vikram guided her through, the crowd of India's elite, politicians, industrialists, film stars, Prisha's anxiety mounted. She recognized faces from magazine covers and television, people whose annual charitable donations probably exceeded her family's lifetime earnings. The reality of what she had done, the absurdity of her presence in this world, struck her with newfound clarity. They approached an elegant couple holding court near the center of the grand ballroom. Mrs. Singhania wore a stunning silk sari adorned with subtle embroidery that probably cost more than a semester of Prisha's tuition. Mr. Singhania exuded the quiet confidence of a man accustomed to having his every word valued. "Mother, father," Vikram said proudly, "this is Prisha Mehta." Mrs. Singhania's assessment was swift but thorough, her practiced smile never wavering. "We've heard so much about you, dear. Vikram tells us your family's foundation has done remarkable work in rural arts education. And your father's investment in sustainable textile manufacturing aligns with our company's recent initiatives," Mr. Singhania added, his handshake firm. "I'd love to discuss potential synergies." Prisha smiled weakly, her mind racing for appropriate responses that wouldn't immediately expose her deception. "My parents believe strongly in ethical business practices," she offered vaguely. "As do we," Mrs. Singhania agreed. "In fact, we're hosting a conference on sustainable luxury next month in Paris. Perhaps your parents would consider attending." Vikram mentioned they frequently travel to Europe. Before Prisha could formulate a response, they were joined by an elderly gentleman whose bearing suggested significant importance. "Ah, Minister Sharma," Mr. Singhania greeted him. "Perfect timing. I wanted to introduce you to Prisha Mehta. Her family's foundation might be interested in supporting your ministry's rural development initiatives." The minister turned curious eyes to Prisha. "Mehta, not related to Rajiv Mehta of Mehta Global Investments by any chance?" "No relation," Prisha said quickly, feeling the conversation spiraling further beyond her control. "Prisha's family is more focused on the arts and education," Vikram explained, his arm supportive around her waist. "Though their business interests are quite diverse." "Fascinating," the minister replied. "And which schools did you attend, my dear? My granddaughter is considering art programs abroad." Each question required another lie, another embellishment to maintain the crumbling facade. By the time they moved on to greet other guests, Prisha felt physically ill. The weight of her deception pressed on her chest, making it difficult to breathe in the perfumed air of privilege. "Are you feeling all right?" Vikram asked with concern as they paused near a terrace doorway. "You seem tense." "I just need some air," Prisha whispered, the room beginning to spin around her. Outside, the night air provided momentary relief, but the sounds of the gala followed her, laughter, classical music, the tinkling of crystal glasses. She found herself in a secluded corner of the garden, illuminated only by distant party lights and the moon overhead. This charade couldn't continue. Tomorrow there would be follow-up conversations about non-existent foundations, invitations her. Fictional parents couldn't accept business proposals that would expose her completely. The house of cards was about to collapse, and all she could do was decide whether to watch it fall or knock it down herself. The sound of approaching footsteps on the garden path forced her to make her decision. Vikram was coming to find her, and with him would come more questions, more lies, more betrayal of the genuine connection they had formed. Prisha wiped the tears from her cheeks, straightened her borrowed dress, and turned to face the consequences of the elaborate fantasy world she had created. Truth in the garden. Moonlight filtered through the canopy of ancient trees, casting dappled shadows across the garden path where Prisha stood. She could hear Vikram's footsteps approaching and steeled herself for what would likely be the end of whatever they had been building together over the past month. "There you are," Vikram said, relief evident in his voice as he came around the corner. I was worried when you disappeared. His expression shifted to concern when he noticed her tear-streaked face. Prisha, what's wrong? She took a deep breath, registering every detail of this moment. The distant music from the gala, the scent of night-blooming jasmine, the warmth in Vikram's eyes that she was about to extinguish. Everything is wrong, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't belong here, Vikram. Not in this house, not at this party, not in your world. Confusion crossed his features. What are you talking about? Of course you belong. Everyone has been charmed by you. They've been charmed by a fiction, Prisha said, the words catching in her throat. Everything I've told you about my life. My family, my background, it's all a lie. The statement hung in the air between them. Vikram's expression remained unchanged, as if he hadn't quite processed her confession. My parents don't own a heritage property in Mussoorie, she continued, the words tumbling out now that she had begun. My father works at the post office in Dehradun. My mother sells handmade shawls at a local market. There is no family foundation, no investment portfolio, no business interests. She gestured to her appearance. This dress is borrowed. I worked double shifts at the campus cafe for 3 weeks to afford the taxi here. I'm at Delhi Arts University on scholarship, and I work 2 part-time jobs just to afford my art supplies. Each revelation felt like removing a heavy weight, even as she recognized that the relief was temporary. Soon would come the anger, the sense of betrayal, the inevitable end. I lied because I was insecure, she admitted, unable to meet his gaze. That first night at the gallery, you were so obviously from a different world. I wanted to impress you, to seem like I belonged in your orbit. Then one lie led to another, and suddenly I was trapped in this elaborate fantasy I'd created. When she finally found the courage to look at him, Vikram's expression was unreadable. He had moved to a stone bench and sat staring at the ornate fountain bubbling nearby. I understand if you never want to see me again, Prisha said, filling the silence. I've betrayed your trust in the worst possible way. I just couldn't continue the charade anymore, especially not with your parents and their connections. It was only a matter of time before someone discovered the truth. Vikram remained quiet for so long that Prisha began to turn away, planning to find her way back to the entrance and call a taxi, her last extravagance before returning to her real life. Do you remember our conversation about Caravaggio? He finally asked, his voice surprisingly gentle. The question caught her off guard. What? Caravaggio. The Italian painter we discussed during our 3rd date. You spoke about how his use of dramatic lighting revealed truth through shadows, how he painted ordinary people as saints to elevate the mundane to the divine. Prisha nodded slowly, uncertain where this was leading. Their discussion of art history had been one of the few genuinely honest exchanges they'd shared. That conversation wasn't a lie, Vikram continued. Neither was your analysis of contemporary South Asian influences in global art markets, or your passionate defense of public arts funding, or the way your eyes light up when you talk about color theory. He stood and moved closer to her. I'm not going to pretend I'm not hurt by the deception, Prisha. But I'm more interested in understanding why you felt it was necessary. His reaction was so unexpected that Prisha found herself momentarily speechless. I never meant to hurt you, she finally managed. It started as a small lie, and then I found myself trapped in it. The more I got to know you, the more I feared losing you if you knew the truth. Vikram's expression softened. Did you really think I was so shallow that I would only value you for your family's supposed wealth? Not shallow, no, Prisha said carefully. But we're from different worlds, Vikram. Look at this place, this life you lead. How could someone like me ever truly fit into it? Unexpectedly, Vikram laughed, a short, almost rueful sound. That's the greatest irony of all, he said, gesturing toward the illuminated mansion behind them. This isn't my world either, not originally. Prisha stared at him in confusion. The Singhania textile empire wasn't always an empire, he explained. sitting back down on the bench and motioning for her to join him. My grandfather was a weaver from a small village in Gujarat. He started with one loom in a rented room, taking whatever commissions he could get. My father was the first in the family to receive a formal education. He worked 18-hour days to expand the business while putting himself through university. This revelation shifted something fundamental in Prisha's understanding of Vikram. "But you seem so at ease with all of this," she said, gesturing toward the opulent gala. "Because I was raised with it," he acknowledged. "I've had privileges you haven't, I don't deny that, but that doesn't mean I can't understand or respect where you come from. My parents made sure I knew our family history, that I understood the value of hard work and perseverance." He reached for her hand, his touch tentative. "The world you've seen tonight, the minister, the celebrities, the business proposals, that's not what matters to me. It never has been." A flicker of hope kindled within Prisha, though she was afraid to nurture it. "Then what does matter to you?" "Authenticity," he said simply. "Passion. Purpose. The very qualities that drew me to you in the first place. Qualities that, ironically, you thought you needed to hide." Prisha felt tears threatening again, but for entirely different reasons. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll start over with me," Vikram suggested. "No more pretending. I want to know the real Prisha Mehta, the one who works double shifts to afford taxi rides, who creates stunning art despite limited resources, who cares enough about honesty to risk losing someone rather than continuing a lie." Before she could respond, voices approached along the garden path. Mrs. Singhania appeared with another elegantly dressed couple. "There you are, darling," she called to Vikram. "The Malhotras were just asking about your collaboration with Prisha's Family Foundation." Prisha tensed, but Vikram squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Actually, Mother," he said clearly, "there's been a misunderstanding about Prisha's background that I'd like to clarify." As Prisha held her breath, waiting for her carefully constructed world to come crashing down around her, she realized that perhaps it wasn't the end she had feared. Perhaps it was just the beginning of something far more valuable, a relationship built on truth rather than illusion. Authentic reflections. 6 months later, Prisha stood in the center of a small gallery space, surveying the final arrangements for her first solo exhibition. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating canvases that represented not just her artistic vision but her personal journey. Each painting told a story of struggle, of aspiration, of the beauty found in ordinary moments and overlooked places. "It's perfect," Zoya declared, adjusting the placement of a framed artist statement. "Professor Sharma was right. This series is your breakthrough." Prisha nodded, still hardly believing that her work had attracted the attention of one of Delhi's up-and-coming galleries. The exhibition, titled Authentic Reflections, featured paintings inspired by her childhood in Dehradun, her parents' humble but dignity-filled lives, and her own experiences navigating between different worlds. "None of this would have happened without the scholarship from the Singhania Foundation," she acknowledged, running her fingers along the edge of a canvas that depicted her mother's hands weaving intricate patterns into a shawl. The aftermath of her confession at the gala had been nothing like the catastrophe she had anticipated. While there had been awkward moments, particularly when Mrs. Singhania realized she'd need to cancel the Paris conference invitations, Vikram had stood firmly by Prisha's side, insisting that her talent and character were what mattered, not her family connections. More surprisingly, Mr. Singhania had been genuinely impressed by her honesty. "It takes courage to admit when you've made a mistake," he had told her later that evening, especially when the easier path would have been to continue the deception. Over the following weeks, as Prisha and Vikram rebuilt their relationship, on a foundation of truth, she had been astonished to discover how many of their genuine connections remained intact. Their discussions about art, their shared sense of humor, their complementary perspectives on life. None of these had been fabrications. The door to the gallery opened, and Prisha's parents entered, their expressions a mixture of pride and wonder as they took in their daughter's achievement. Her father, Rajesh, straightened his modest but carefully pressed shirt, while her mother, Sunita, adjusted the folds of her best sari. "Beta, this is beyond anything we could have imagined," Rajesh said, embracing his daughter with tears in his eyes. "Your paintings, they tell our story with such dignity." "That's because it is a story worth telling," Prisha replied, her own eyes moist. "I'm sorry it took me so long to understand that." The door opened again, and the Singhania family entered. Vikram leading the way, his parents following with the same grace they had displayed at the gala, though now their warmth extended to Prisha's family as well. The meeting of these two families had initially been tense, with Prisha's parents overwhelmed by the Singhania's status and wealth. But over months of shared meals and genuine conversations, unexpected connections had formed. Mr. Singhania and Rajesh had discovered a shared passion for classical music. Sunita had tentatively shown Mrs. Singhania her handcrafted textiles, leading to a small but meaningful collaboration with the Singhania Company's artisanal line. "The exhibition looks wonderful," Mrs. Singhania said, greeting Prisha with a warm embrace that would have been unimaginable 6 months earlier. "The Foundation Board was right to invest in your vision." The Singhania Foundation Scholarship Program for emerging artists from underprivileged backgrounds, inspired, Vikram had told her by her story, had provided Prisha with the financial support to complete her degree without juggling multiple jobs. The grant had also funded the materials for the exhibition pieces. "Thank you for believing in me," Prisha said, including both sets of parents in her gratitude, especially after everything that happened. As guests began to arrive for the preview, fellow students, professors, local art critics, Vikram took Prisha's hand and led her to a quiet corner. "I have something for you," he said, producing a small wrapped package. A pre-exhibition gift. Inside was a beautifully bound sketchbook, its cover embossed with her name. When she opened it, she found the first page inscribed with a quote from Frida Kahlo. "I paint my own reality." "For your next chapter," Vikram explained, "whatever that may be." The warmth in his eyes reflected the transformation in their relationship. From a connection built on pretense to a partnership grounded in mutual respect and understanding. "You know," Prisha said thoughtfully, "when I first met you, I thought wealth was about possessions, status, appearances. I created this fictional version of myself because I thought that's what would impress you." "And now?" Vikram prompted. "Now I understand that true wealth comes from authenticity, from embracing who you are and where you come from, even the parts that seem ordinary or insufficient." She gestured around the gallery. "These paintings aren't about poverty or privilege. They're about finding beauty and dignity in every life, regardless of circumstance." As the gallery filled with visitors admiring her work, Prisha observed the unlikely mingling of her worlds. Her university friends chatting with her parents, Zoya explaining a particularly complex piece to an art collector, the Singhanias engaging thoughtfully with her professors. The barriers she had once perceived as insurmountable had proven in the end to be largely of her own creation. Later that evening, as the successful preview wound down, Prisha found herself standing beside the painting that had started everything, a reimagined version of the abstract piece Vikram had first admired at the university exhibition. She had reworked it over the past months, adding layers of complexity and authenticity that reflected her journey. "This one is still my favorite," Vikram said, joining her, "though now I understand so much more about what inspired it." "The difference is that now you're seeing the real me," Prisha replied, "not just the person I thought you wanted to see." As they stood together in the quiet gallery, surrounded by honest expressions of her vision and experience, Prisha realized that the most valuable thing she had gained wasn't the scholarship, the exhibition, or even Vikram's affection. It was the freedom that came with authenticity, the understanding that her true self, with all its struggles and imperfections, was worthy of being seen, known, and loved. The pretense she had constructed to impress Vikram had crumbled, but in its place had grown something far more beautiful and enduring, a life no longer divided between worlds, but instead enriched by embracing all the facets of who she truly was.